This is JCT TV, Bible study for the 21st century. So friends, welcome. Jim Cantelon here. JCT is here for one reason. It's to add value to your life in terms of your study of the life and ministry of Jesus. There's so many places I could go with the scripture. The Bible's huge. But my focus is Matthew, Mark, Luke, Acts, and John. It takes me years to go through it. I've gone through one cycle in 5.5 years, and I'm starting all over again. And I hope it adds value to your life.
WOW! Working for Orphans and Widows has been caring for orphans and widows in Africa and India for over 20 years. Key to its vision is partnership with local champions who engage hundreds of church-based volunteers in home-based care. Care for the sick and the dying in their own humble homes. They are defenseless and afflicted. They are the least of these that Jesus would have us love and care for. Our partnered champions are based in South Africa, Zambia, Malawi, and India. They provide faithful, accountable, and godly care for thousands. Together with WOW, they truly are the hands and feet of Jesus to the sick and the dying. Founder and President Jim Cantelon has been committed to both teaching the gospel via Jim Cantelon Today TV and practicing the gospel through WOW. WOW is a proven ministry. We are grateful for your support. Call, write, or log on to wowmission.com and be inspired.
So friends, last time I read verses 12 through 25 of Matthew chapter 4, and I ran out of time. And just because your memory is probably no better than mine, let me read it again, and then I will continue my commentary on that passage because it's really important. Beginning with verse 12 of chapter 4. When Jesus heard that John had been put in prison, he withdrew to Galilee. Leaving Nazareth, he went and lived in Capernaum, which was by the lake in the area of Zebulun and Naphtali, to fulfill what was said through the prophet Isaiah, land of Zebulun, land of Naphtali, the way of the sea, beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. The people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. From that time on, Jesus began to preach, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near." As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter, his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come, follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, the paralyzed. He healed them. Large crowds from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan followed him. So, John the Baptist has been thrown in prison, and he's now out to get Jesus. Jesus was no coward, but he also was no dummy. His ministry was just beginning, and he wasn't about to get thrown into prison. His time was not yet. And so what he did is he left Nazareth and moved to Capernaum in the Galilee. This region was known as the Galilee of the Gentiles. It was looked down upon by the citizens of Judea, But it was called Galilee of the Gentiles because that area was critical to international trade, as it was on the trade route between Egypt and Damascus. It was called the Way of the Sea. And so it was a thriving commercial center with people from every nation, you know, in North Africa and Asia and the Mediterranean basin. I mean, people of every stripe and color. And as such, it was cosmopolitan and alive with the bustle of camel caravans and the colorful languages and fashions of the outside world. For Jesus, moving there was a critical thing because he left his provincial hometown of Nazareth and established worldly Capernaum as his ministry base. As it was often said, the world comes through Galilee. The Way of the Sea cut right through Galilee. And so Jesus was where the action was. He really placed his hand on the pulse of the world's heartbeat, and he brought good news to the nations just by being there. He had a succinct message, very much like his cousin John's: repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near. And this was a novel message for the Gentiles, for sure, but it had a familiar ring for any Jewish person because they had this end-time hope. And the concept of the kingdom was very familiar to them too. The rabbis taught this, that whenever a Jew recited the great Shema, Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. That's Hebrew. That's Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That's recited every time a minyan is established and a service begins in a synagogue. And by minyan, I mean there has to be a group of 10 men in order for a service proper to begin. Interesting story, by the way. When my wife and I and our 3 little kids first moved to Jerusalem, our very first Jerusalem Israeli friends were a wonderful Canadian lawyer and his wife and their children, a bit older than our kids. And they had moved to Jerusalem about 20 years previously, and he had a very successful law practice there. And they were just sweet. We had so much in common with them because of our Canadian heritage, but also we just liked them. And their oldest son was about to have his bar mitzvah, which, you know, coming of age. You hit a certain age at 12, 13, depending if you're a boy or a girl, and you're called to the law. You become bar mitzvah, you become son of the law, if you will. And a woman is bat mitzvah, daughter of the law. And so we were told to come to their synagogue on French Hill in Jerusalem for a certain time. I think it was 9:30 in the morning. And we're just newly minted, you know, immigrants. We say 9:30, 9:30. We show up at 9:30, nobody's there. 10 o'clock, nobody's here. About 10:30, people start trickling in. We discovered right there that in Israel, time is a relative thing. Anyway, as people were gathering in, the president of the synagogue, his name, I won't give you his name, but he was also a lawyer and also a Canadian, by the way. He's rushing around, you know, and I thought, what's up with this? He was trying to get the minyan together. He had to have 10 men. And finally, he's looking around desperately, and he comes to me. Jim, would you join our minyan? I said, Al, well, how can I do that? I'm a Gentile. I'm not a Jew, but I had my talit on, my prayer cloth, and my kippah, just because you have to have that as a male in the synagogue. Jim, you look like you were born to us. Please. So I may be the only Gentile in history who was a part of a minyan in order to start a synagogue service. Anyway, what got me onto that? Jesus was very Jewish, and the Jewish people were a little bit intimidated by the fact that he was so Jewish and at the same time acted like a Gentile. He didn't mind eating with Gentiles. He seemed to be very worldly. And there in Capernaum, he just fit right in because he was able to kind of mix and match, if you will. And most of the Gentiles coming through wouldn't have a clue. I mean, they didn't know about Jewish dietary laws or kosher or certain rituals on weekends, what have you. Anyway, there he was in the middle of all of this. The Galilee provided a doorway to the greater Roman province of Syria. And at that time, Palestine was a part of Syria, the Roman province of Syria. Its territory included Palestine. It was bounded by the Jordan River on the east, the Mediterranean River on the west, I should say the Mediterranean Ocean on the west, and the mountains of Lebanon in the north. So it was a huge area. From Mount Hermon, 10,000 feet above sea level, in the north, the upper Galilee descended in plains and marshlands through something called Lake Hula, which has been drained, to the lower Galilee, which was 400 feet below sea level, where the Sea of Galilee sat in a beautiful, resplendent presence. And then, as it descended further, following the course of the Jordan, Jordan means down rusher, by the way, because it rushes down from 400 feet below sea level to 1,500 feet below sea level, down at the Dead Sea, it gave way to the Jordan Valley and ultimately the Dead Sea. So the Galilee of Jesus' time was essentially 40 miles from north to south, 25 miles east to west, heavily treed at that time, well watered with streams from the northern mountains, fertile with black volcanic soil that had been deposited there over the centuries from Mount Hermon's past eruptions. It was a great exporter of olive oil, vegetables, fish, and it was cut off from Jerusalem by Samaria. So it stood culturally alone, producing rugged farmers, fishermen, and tradesmen, the salt of the earth laborers who spoke with a rich Galilean accent, seemingly unperturbed by their alienation from the Jewish city dwellers in Jerusalem. And when it was asked, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Those elite urbanites might just have asked, can anything good come out of Galilee? The Galileans, of course, ignored this snobbery and kept fishing. So, Jesus called disciples, fishermen. Follow me, he says. I'll make you fishers of men. He concurrently began to minister to the needs of the Galileans, not just in Capernaum, but he went to the synagogues of the various towns and villages of the Galilee. And it's a beautiful area. My goodness, I used to drive from Jerusalem up, down to the Sea of Galilee, and then up to the Upper Galilee, right up to the northern border. And I used to broadcast 2 shifts a week from a radio station in a war zone in southern Lebanon. And I just loved the journey through the Galilee, especially when I was coming back from Lebanon in the late evening, or the late afternoon, I should say, and the sun's rays would be making the grass on the slopes of the hills so green in the springtime, and the coats of the sheep so white, and the blue of the Sea of Galilee so blue. It's just a wonderful place to be. And I loved it, and I love it still.
For over 20 years, WOW, working for orphans and widows, has been caring for vulnerable and at-risk women and children hard hit by the HIV and AIDS pandemic in Africa and India. WOW engages with local partner champions and church-based volunteers in the care of the desperately needy. Now, in recent months, we have expanded our reach to Ukraine. Over 8 million refugees have fled the ravages of that war-torn country, mostly women and children, including many orphans. Our partner in East Europe tells us of the busing of Ukrainian orphans through the night to safety. Churches have become refugee centers, opening their buildings to become safe havens in the rescue. And WOW has come alongside. We have begun supporting this rescue work, but there is so much more that we must provide to these heroic churches. They need funding to continue for hundreds of orphans yet to come. We may be only small players, but you can partner with us in the rescue of Ukrainian orphans. WOW is a proven ministry. We are grateful for your support. Call, write, or log on to wowmission.com and be inspired.
Now, in describing the Galilee to you, the Upper Galilee, the Lower Galilee, a kind of bridge between the upper and the lower occurs in the area of what we call the Mount of Beatitudes. Now, I need to describe this to you. As I said, I used to drive up to Jerusalem, I should say from Jerusalem up to the Upper Galilee and up to Lebanon every week for the 7 years I lived in Jerusalem, broadcasting from a radio station in a war zone in southern Lebanon. It was a most fascinating experience for me. It takes me an hour to tell you the story, how it all came about. I've written about it here and there in my book, Cantelon's Casual Commentary, which you can log on the internet, buy it, Cantelon's Casual Commentary. Matthew, Mark, Luke, Acts, and John, and I draw a lot of illustrations from my time in Israel. But when you're in Jerusalem, you have to go down to Jericho. You go out of Jerusalem and then you go down these very steep Judean hills, down, 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 down. And as you're doing that on the right side, sometimes the left side, you see some of the goat paths and some of the donkey paths. They're still being used to this day, that were definitely being used as roads in Jesus' time. The road from Jericho to Jerusalem, the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I can just see it happening before my eyes as I'm driving past these basically shelves on the sides of the mountains. But you get down to Jericho, and then at that time, and it's still pretty much the case, I was just driving there a few months ago, the road from Jericho up to Tiberias is a 2-lane highway. It's very irregular. It's off camber in many places, doesn't have proper shoulders on it. It's narrow. And when you get caught behind military vehicles, as I did almost every time I drove up to Lebanon, you just have to go at their speed, because it's very, very seldom you're able to have a clear enough straightaway to pass. Occasionally you do. When you find it and there's no one coming your way, away you go. However, you get to the south end of the Sea of Galilee. There's various kibbutzim on both sides. And you go around the left side of the Sea of Galilee, that would be the west side, and about 12 kilometers or so from the southern tip of the Sea of Galilee, I'd say 7 or 8 kilometers, is Tiberias, which is one of the holy cities of Israel. It's where a lot of the Talmud was written over hundreds of years. It's very sacred to Orthodox Jews. It's subtropical. In the summertime, it's almost unbearably hot. But it's right along the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. And the western shore now is just a number of fish restaurants and a few other places where you can get an ice cream cone or sit down in the shade of some umbrellas. It's beautiful. It really is. You travel through Tiberias, and you kind of wind around a bit along the western shore of the Sea of Galilee. You go past Magdala, where Mary Magdalene is from, and now Magdala, by the way, it wasn't the case when I lived there. It was just a point of interest, but now it's been fully excavated by archaeologists. And it was a fish processing town, and it's huge. And it had the most beautiful synagogue, and the synagogue has been excavated. It's gorgeous. It just, takes you right back to Jesus' time. You continue past Magdala another few minutes, and you come to the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, and that's where Capernaum is, where Jesus became, central in his ministry. From there, you start climbing switchbacks, up, up, up. There's 8 switchbacks, believe me. I've done them so many times, I can do them in my sleep. There's 8 of them. I used to love doing it with my kids, because before the days of seat belts and child restraints, my kids used to love to get in the back of our station wagon, Volkswagen, and every time I'd go around a switchback, I would throw them from one side to the other, and they're laughing and screaming and loving it. Anyway, as you're going up these switchbacks, on your right, you see a strange-looking building, and it's the chapel that was built by Mussolini on the Mount of Beatitudes. I'll describe this to you as we get into the Sermon on the Mount. Past that, you then begin to travel kind of a slow but steady incline all the way to southern Lebanon. The border town is called Metula. I used to stay there in a hotel, the Erazim Hotel, when I was up broadcasting overnight. And from there, I had a military pass, and I was allowed with my Volkswagen to go through the military gate and into southern Lebanon, which is a very dangerous place to go, to this little abandoned customs house where a radio station had been built by a ministry out of California. And I was their selected standby guy. And I didn't want to stand by. I was there every week. Anyway, this is the Galilee, Upper Galilee. Then when you come back, you don't even need your motor. You just, if you wanted to, you just coast and coast and coast for a good 20 kilometers. It's down, 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 till you come to the top of those switchbacks, and you start coming down, and there on your left is the Mount of Beatitudes. Okay. Whenever I would do this, coming back, if it was daylight, I would go in. I couldn't resist it. I have a homing instinct for the Mount of Beatitudes, where the Sermon on the Mount was preached, the greatest sermon of all time. And I'd drive in, and usually I was the only one there. There was a little kiosk run by an Arab Christian who sold beautiful orange juice. He would crush it there right in front of you and give it to you cold and juicy. And across from him, there was a kind of a convent, a beautiful convent for Roman Catholic nuns. And then in front of that, right on the edge of the hill or the mount, was this Mussolini chapel, built beautifully, very gorgeous, a lot of marble and very minimalist, really. And from there, you can look right out over the Sea of Galilee. It's like you're in an airplane. Well, just before going into the garden where the nunnery is and also the chapel, just down from the kiosk where the Arabs served orange juice, was a cluster of olive trees, eucalyptus trees, very tall, barkless trees. And eucalyptus trees had been brought by early Israeli settlers to help them clear the hula swamp. They suck up a lot of water, and Israelis kind of see them as modern day weeds, but boy, they're a beautiful tree. And this cluster of trees providing a lot of shade, and at the base of the trees, a kind of a circle of basalt rocks. Almost looks like somebody placed them there, but the diameter would have been maybe 25, 30 feet, and they're on the slope of the hill. But it's the place where I imagine Jesus sat leaning back against one of those rocks, and the other disciples either sat on or against the rocks beneath him. See, rabbis, when they taught in those days, sat. They didn't stand. And there certainly were a lot of hangers-on who must have been on the periphery. But they respected, the fact that Jesus had these special 12, and he was giving them a special teaching session, and so they didn't disturb him. There he preaches, teaches the greatest sermon of all time, bar none, the greatest sermon of all time. And I find myself absolutely drawn to Matthew 5, 6, and 7 all the time. I've just written a book. It's about to be published called Opening the Windows of Your Soul, where I analyze the Lord's Prayer that is in the Sermon on the Mount. But as I was writing that book, I was refreshing my memory of these countless times I've been there and how much I love it there, the peace of the place, this stunning view of the lake beneath me, the Upper Galilee above me, the Lower Galilee below me, the Golan Heights to my left, Safat, one of the other Jerusalem or Jewish holy cities to my right, the home of Jewish mysticism called Kabbalah. And then over to my right, the Horns of Hittim, where a famous battle was fought between warring factions during the time of the Crusades. And then Tiberias over there, looking white in the sun. And it's just, it's like sensory overload. It really is. And I open up my little, jeans pocket Bible to Matthew 5, and I read this. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. And he said, now I'm going to stress this when I'm with you next program, but he starts out with what's known as the Beatitudes. And the first one is, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I've said this in books I've written about this, and I'll say it for the rest of my life in ministry. Everything in the Sermon on the Mount pivots on that first beatitude. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Jesus' words are irrelevant if you're not poor in spirit. These words are not for the spiritually proud or haughty. These are for those who are broken, who understand that they have need of a Savior. And what beautiful, healing, salvific words they are.
Wow! Working for Orphans and Widows is a trusted Christian charity reaching out to the sick and the dying, the least of these in pandemic-stricken Africa and India. For over 22 years, Jim and Kathy Cantelon have engaged with community-based champions and church volunteers in the care for those whom Jim calls society's weakest link. Everything from home-based palliative care to the rescue and protection of young women and girls who are victims of abuse is done in the name of Jesus and is overseen by local partner champions and an army of church-based volunteers. WOW has a proven track record. Check it out on wowmission.com, or if you wish, you can call or write to us. Its sustainability is dependent on the support of faithful friends like you.
You know, friends, as I'm sitting here in the studio, I'm just a few weeks from spending a few weeks in Africa. My wife and I go there a couple times a year just to monitor and evaluate our relationship and our funding of some key critical ministries that we have been supporting now for 23 years. These are champion ministries that are local church-based that are dealing so effectively with orphans and widows, especially those impacted by HIV and AIDS, COVID-19, and opportunistic infections, and just afflictions that are related to living in total poverty. Believe me, the needs are humongous. And these are the poor in spirit. And what a blessing to see them come to faith and also to have their physical needs in a modest way met by the support that people like you provide. I want to thank you for your help. Support JCT and WOW. And together we'll support the least of these, God's people.